Good day, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Conversations with AARP in the Virgin Islands. I'm Troy Deshabir Schuster, State Director for AARP in this territory. AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. With a nationwide presence, AARP strengthens communities and advocates for what matters most to the more than 100 million Americans aged 50 and older and their families with regard to issues such as health security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. At a time of increasing longevity, AARP is working to promote well designed, livable communities that are safe, accessible, and vibrant for all ages. This is realized through its work on livable communities. This initiative was developed as part of AARP's Age Friendly Communities program that provides evidence based recommendations to public officials, community stakeholders, and residents to help communities realize their own visions for building more livable, walkable, and environmentally safe regions. Joining us today is Director Daryl Jaschen, who is the director of the Virgin Islands Territorial Emergency Management Agency, otherwise known as VITEMA, to discuss the linkage between emergency management and the environment. So, Director Jaschen, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Troy.
Yeah, thank you for being on the show with us again today. You've been with us a couple of times in the past. It's always a lively, informative conversation, and so we have another big topic that's of concern to many people here on St. Croix as well as the broader Virgin Islands. So, first of all, tell us a little bit about VITEMA in general. What does VITEMA do, and how does it interface with FEMA and the EPA, just generally speaking?
All right, thanks for the question. And VITEMA is the single, coordinating element for the territory per the VI code. So you have a state, you have cities, you have counties. In the territory, the VI code says the Virgin Islands Territory Emergency Management is a single coordinating element. So as we do have emergencies, disasters, we look at developing plans. We work very much with the local community. We're developing some links to the private sector also. And of course, when the federal partners come down here, it could be FEMA, the federal side of the house for emergencies such as a hurricane, a disaster, or in some cases, we're now working with the Emergency Protection Agency, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, on some things that are happening over on St. Croix at the refinery site called Port Hamilton. So we've been very much involved with that using what's called the Environmental Local Emergency Planning Committee that involves VITEMA, Department of Health, Department of Human Resources, involves DPNR, involves EPA, involves VI Fire, EMS. Since VITEMA has 911, also we coordinate any action that may come from 911 for early notice and warning to the community. I do manage the mass messaging system called Alert VI that you can get and sign up for. They'll get messages either in English or Spanish, and you get it by text, by phone call, or we can send you an email.
Does every state and territory have an agency like VITEMA?
Yes, every state territory has what's called a state level agency, usually reporting to the governor. I report directly to Governor Bryan as a cabinet member. The difference is some states, they do have cities and counties separately, and some of the funding that comes down federally has to be spent not just at the state level, has to be spent down for the counties and the cities. And a lot of times, they'll share resources, they'll share individuals that may be emergency manager in a county A with county B, as well as equipment from different fire stations for different counties and cities. Just like New York City, it's a tremendous mix of different emergency management agencies, but there is a state level emergency management. We found out during COVID, like New York, it would develop policy at the state level, then have to implement it at county and city level. Whereas Governor Bryan, we develops a policy, but also we have to implement that. So we are responsible for our own implementation, which is a little bit different from probably other states or territories or commonwealths.
Every once in a while, I hear a test of the tsunami alert system. But yet some time ago, maybe it was a year or two ago, I heard that there was some problem with it, that it wasn't quite functioning the way it should. Can you speak to that? Is it functioning now as it ought? Will we get proper notice of a tsunami?
Thanks for the question. Every month, the third Thursday of the month, which is like tomorrow, the 18th of May, we're going to be testing our tsunami sirens throughout the territory. There's 44 total of those. I have 19 of them on St. Thomas, 1 on Water Island, 7 on St. John, and 17 on St. Croix. So we test those every month, and we call it get to know the tone of the siren. It should last only about 60 seconds. It'll be testing starts at 11 o'clock in the morning for the island of St. Croix, and then for the St. Thomas, St. John, Water Island District about 11:15. We actually conducted tests from our 911 centers on St. Thomas and St. Croix, but you are correct. Some of the repairs that were done, what was identified back in 2017 from the storm, they're not working, honestly. So I think I have about 7 of them on St. Croix specifically. Then in some cases I have bad batteries, I have bad solar panels. I have some equipment. We're in the process right now working with the contractor to get them back in here to actually finishing validating those. So part of that test each month is to make sure I capture the evidence to then show back to the contractor. On St. Thomas, for example, I know I have 2 of them down by the airport, Lindbergh Bay. It's missing a siren head, so it's not going to sound for sure, but that's part of the process of getting it done. Plus, I want to establish what we call maintenance plans. So each year I want to be able to have the contractors come in to validate, we have all the systems that are working. So part of this testing is to make sure things are working. Also, it's all done by radio signal. So sometimes the radio signals may not be aligned properly between the repeaters. So part of that is validating through our local communications provider whether or not that the signal is working properly. So you are correct. I think on the island of St. John, all of them are working fine. All 7 of them, Water Island's working fine. And I have 17 of the 19 working over in St. Thomas. Here on St. Croix, I have my biggest challenge right now. But the good thing is I know which ones I'm having challenges with.
Good. And what triggers it? I've always wondered, is it the moment there's an earthquake of a certain magnitude, or is there some buoy that actually detects the beginning of a tidal wave? How does it work? What triggers it?
There's multiple things. And if you sign up for Alert VI system, you'll get a notice that talks about an earthquake, usually magnitude 4.1 or above within about 150-mile radius of the territory. And outside of that, it's a 6.1 or above. So usually following that message within about 5 minutes, it'll tell you whether or not there's a concern for a possible tsunami. That's typically how a tsunami is triggered. And we have tsunamis that may be locally. And if you go back to history books, back in 1867, we did have an earthquake in the Anegada Trench between St. Thomas and St. Croix that was about a 7.5 magnitude. So you definitely felt it in the territory. There was no question about whether or not you had it felt, but there was a tsunami trigger from that impacted both St. Thomas, Water Island, St. John, and the island of St. Croix. And unfortunately, some lives were lost also. So that we have today, we have the sirens for advance notice, but there are what's called regional tsunamis. We did an exercise back in March 16th, and that was based upon an eruption out in Mount Pelée, which is in Martinique. Basically, we had about 45 minutes to get here. So we went through some exercises and we did evacuation drills. And you have long distance tsunamis, such even historically back in Portugal on the other side of the Atlantic that could come impact us also. So the trigger for that, though, is really how much time we have. And again, if it's a local tsunami, you have an earthquake and you have huge magnitude, do not wait for an alert. Do not wait for the sirens to go off. Please get out of the elevation threat, if you will. Our goal is to get off the shoreline up about 82 feet. So that's about 8 stories above the shoreline. That's what they would call the evacuation zone. You don't need to go all the way up on top of Scenic Highway or up to Crown Mountain in St. Thomas or the top of St. John. You just 82 feet above sea level is where you want to go to. But all of it can be triggered. Last year we had an eruption in the Pacific in Tonga, and that generated a tsunami also for the community there. They did not have much time. You can see it coming also. The other piece, prior to a tsunami arrival, you'll start seeing the water will recede. So if you start seeing all of a sudden, we don't have much of a tide here, but if you see all of a sudden a lot of the ocean floor show up, that's another signal that the tsunami is going to be coming forward. And they come in waves. They'll come waves of water that come through. Maybe not just be a single plop. It may be a wad of water that comes in. It'll last 3 or 4 minutes. It'll keep pushing it inland. So you want to wait until we also give you the all clear signal before you come down out of the hills, so to speak, or go back down to the shoreline. So excellent question to ask about that. But we do have the impact of working with Tsunami Warning Center, which is actually in Hawaii, but we do locally here with the Earthquake Center out of Puerto Rico. And of course, the National Weather Service in Puerto Rico provides us updates on the weather, earthquakes, tsunamis. We all stay together very importantly. We work also with the British Virgin Islands for communication back and forth, and we share information. There are buoys, like you talked about. There's a buoy about 300 miles north of the territory and one about 300 miles south of the territory that's part of the DART system, D-A-R-T. Basically, it's provide early warning for the tsunamis also. I believe only the one in the south part is working today. The one on the north side is not working. But again, a lot of that is to provide early warning system to the East Coast. But really for us, it goes back to earthquake modeling and advanced notice. The other piece we run into is how high that wave may be. If it's going to be predicted to be above 3 feet, that's definitely a condition that will be sounding the alarms for everybody. And it's basically like a warning and a watch based upon the time. But so it's so important. If you do hear the siren, you get the text messages, you look at what it says, and you're able to then very quickly, and our goal is to have individuals be able to evacuate within 10 minutes to get to the height of 82 feet. So please take a look at where you live, where you work, where you go to church, and start thinking through, if I had a tsunami alert, where would I go? You can get an app down for your phones. It's called My Alert or My Altitude to talk about where your elevation is today, to see if you're already at 90 feet, you may be fine. If you're on the island of St. Croix, we have Centerline Road that basically goes east to west. The rule of thumb would be, unless you're right down in Frederickstead, basically if you're up on the inland side of that, up the hill, that's basically a safe place to go right across that. If you're in Frederickstead, you want to get to Mars Hill. That's where you're going to go to. Obviously, Charlemagne or Red Hook or in Cruz Bay, you need to get up elevation-wise as soon as you can. So 10 minutes is what we're trying to have everybody be prepared to go. So if you start hearing the alerts warning, please don't just think you're safe where you are. Look at getting the elevation. Do not take a car. Get out and walk, please. You can do it safely in walking because you'll get stuck in traffic, or if water starts coming in, your car will start floating away. Unfortunately, it doesn't take much water for the car to start floating. So please think that through. But excellent question to ask about the tsunamis and the evacuation plan, as well as the tsunami warning sirens we have.
Great. Thank you for that information. Our show today wasn't focused on that, but I figured it was an important question to ask because it's something that we should all be concerned about at any and every moment, really.
Yes.
So thank you for providing us with that information. AARP, one of our major national campaigns is livable communities. And we are always advocating for healthy, vibrant, safe communities for the 50+ population, but also for people of all ages, because what's good for somebody who is 80 years of age is good for somebody who is 8 or even 8 months. So here in the Virgin Islands, we've been working on this Livable Communities campaign. And one of the major issues that we keep hearing about in the news is about the refinery in St. Croix and all of the environmental issues or environmental threats that the refinery poses, and all of the chatter about EPA and so forth. Some people for it, some people against it. Can you give us an update on that? What is the status of the refinery now? What is the EPA doing? And how is VITEMA working along with the EPA?
Okay, the area that we used to call Havenza in the past is sort of broken in 2 sectors right now. One is the storage side of that. We call it Ocean Point Terminals. That's who owns the storage capacity for that as a separate business going forward. And then we have Port Hamilton Refinery and Transportation, which is not in the production state today. The EPA came down, the federal EPA came down in December and said, in order for you to move forward and even think about doing refinery, there's a couple of conditions we need to have you conform to. Because the refinery had been in a non-operational status, because the refinery is close to the ocean where you used to have a lot of corrosion. There were several locations there with actually had product in the pipes. The EPA said you have to remove these products from the property before you can even think about going forward. So back in February of 2023, Port Hamilton worked with EPA to come up with an acceptable solution. They being Port Hamilton contracted with third-party companies that are professionals at removing chemicals, hazardous materials from refinery points, and that was acceptable to the EPA. They had set up training sites for that here locally. They did some pre-training, moving materials down. VITEMA was very much involved with that, part of what we call the Local Emergency Planning Committee, LEPC, which is environmentally focused. It's something that's been around years. When Havenza and Hess was in place, had gone quiet for a couple of years, but now for the last year or so, we've activated it back up again. It's just not Port Hamilton, Ocean Point. It would include any businesses that are industrial sections that have quantities of materials that would be part of the right to know, probably over 10,000 gallons. So we have confirmation with Cruise and Rum, Diageo. We look at even the National Guard has commodities, Home Depot, obviously Port Hamilton. So it's very important that we're working together on looking at any issues or concerns that may be affecting the environment. Specifically now we're looking at this removal of these three substances. One's called rich amine solution, AMINE. Other one's called anhydrous or concentrated ammonia. And the last one's called LPG or liquid petroleum gas. So they are physically located in pipes in the refinery, not being used for anything in the production side. And again, in concerns that they may be compromised in the future if the conditions were still set for that. So they started back in mid-April. And again, part of the LAPC, we meet every week with them. We met actually yesterday for an hour. We talked about what the process is in removing those contaminant environmental concerns. They're actually moving them into what's called specially mobile tanks called ISO tanks, and those tanks are being transported from the refinery to the connected fence into the container port to be taken outside the territory. So, for example, the amine solution, the rich amine solution, we anticipated it was going to take about 55 of these large ISO tanks to be evacuated or de-inventory. They've gone through about 46 of them so far, and they assume they'd be about 80% removed of all of that particular rich amines. Of that, we've actually taken over, or they've taken over 36 of those ISO tanks to get changed out and taken outside the territory, of which 6 had now been taken out and taken to Texas to basically be disposed of. So the rich amine, that basically one of the concerns was that would give out a hydrogen sulfide smell. So what EPA has done, they put out air monitoring stations inside the plant itself, right, where the areas to be de-inventoried are for the amines and for the anhydrous ammonia and for the LPG. Additionally, they put out 14 air monitoring stations the public can see either on the fence line or in the community that would be located downwind of Port Hamilton. And that's available at the EPA website. If you do a Google search and put EPA and PRHT for Port Hamilton Refinery Terminal, it'll come up with that website, and you can go see the details on that. It's a real-time live monitoring of all stations for that, so you can see what's happening. They've also set up a 1-866 hotline number you can call if you smell something in the area and you want to call, and I'll give you that number so you can write that down and have it available. Again, this is going to be going on. It started in mid-April. It's probably going to go on through probably the end of June, maybe July, depending upon the whole process that goes through. But this is the EPA's hotline number. Again, this is for if you smell something, you have the concerns of something in the area, you can call 800. It's 1-866-462-4789. So 1-866-462-4789. So that's the EPA's hotline. You can push a button for English, Spanish, and we put in some the patois for Haitian Creole. So we wanted to make sure it was a friendly hotline. They'll take some information. It'll be anonymous, and basically they will go out and verify that. We've set up a border from the location that the EPA has 2 teams running 24-hour a day that go out and investigate. It's beyond a certain area. I also have VI Fire EMS that will go out and investigate and report back. And you can see the results on the website itself, which tell you what results are going on. So far since the 24th of April, we've probably had about 5 or 6 calls, not to the hotline, but either to 911 VITEMA or to the EPA directly as you're in a territory, or to DPNR, and we've investigated those. A lot of them are traced back to Waste Management Authority for some of the pumping stations, and they do put out hydrogen sulfide, but nothing has been linked back at all to any of the activities that we're doing at Port Hamilton with the amine solution, the inventory, or we've done the ammonia right now. So those two, we haven't started the LPG. LPG should start probably this Friday once DPNR provides the air permit. So DPNR is involved with the monitoring permit besides the EPA. So that's important for both the ammonia side of the house as well as for the LPG. That's been very, very important to work together. So part of this education and outreach, the EPA came down here for a couple of weeks, and we had outreach to the community. We had handouts as to the community. Also, we had 2 sessions that were set up. One was at Central High School, one was at UVI to explain what was going to happen and give out some information sheets, talk about the hotline, actually ask individuals to sign up for alert VI system. So again, if something does come up and there's an alert concern, that best way you'll get the information is through the alert system from VITEMA. And VITEMA will give you some information that says, oh, there's something in the area, avoid this area, or we may say, shelter in place, which means stay in your home, turn the air conditioner off, and we'll give you an all clear once the monitor goes back down. Or there may be a concern that says you need to evacuate. And the evacuation we've set up right now, working with Department of Health and Human Services and Sports Parks Direct, would be the DC Ganagata Community Center, would be the assembly area you would go to, only if we give you a order to evacuate. And of course, we work with VIPD, that they would also go through the community and put out a notice that would say, please evacuate. But we don't anticipate that being for any more than a couple hours. Again, that we have monitoring stations inside, we being EPA, that you don't see on the website, but they're right there. So we see some early detection, and we'll see it in the community at one of these 14 locations, and we'll get the information out very quickly. And we've been training for this for the last several months. We do get internally, we've been using 911 has a call down list, about 25 of us. If something is called in, we're aware of it. We can send out VI Fire, EMS to investigate, or the EPA to look at this. And this is very good. And they'll be there through the duration of this inventory, de-inventory of all 3 of these products that are going on. So it's so important. The last thing I would say, Troy, on this, tomorrow, which is going to be the 18th of May, the EPA is going to have a Zoom call. It's basically for the community to be participating with. It's going to be from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock at night. The VITEMA Facebook page is going to have a live broadcast on that also. So you can get in and basically you can chat your questions if you want to the EPA. There'll be representatives from the EPA on, I'll be on, VI Fire, EMS, Department of Health, Human Services, DPNR. So really the government is going to be there. The EPA is going to be there to talk about any concerns you may want to have on this particular event that's going on, but also the EPA has historical knowledge for previous events that have happened, and you may want to ask some questions to them about what's happened in the past and what's going on. That's stuff that I'm not aware of historically. I'm aware of basically what's going on right now with the safe de-inventory of these 3 chemicals that are going on. Again, we started back in 24 April. We're about 80% through on the rich amine solution. We're finishing up very quickly on the ammonia, and we'll start the LPG. We should finish by the end of June, which also involves rinsing the areas, rinsing the pipes, doing some other pieces. They're not just the chemicals that are harmful have been evacuated, they're gone, but also looking at the transportation of all those chemicals in proper containers outside the territory. Nothing's planned right now of those 3 chemicals to stay in the territory. It's all going to be transported through the container port outside the territory. So that's a lot to cover, but I appreciate the discussion and opportunity to talk about it.
Great, thank you. And again, for our audience, how would they get the link and information about that Zoom video conference with EPA and VITEMA coming up?
Yeah, the best way to get that link is if you have access to the VITEMA Facebook page. So if you go to the Facebook page, my PIO, Eric Ackerson, it'll be doing a live broadcast for that. So again, tomorrow night, which is going to be the 18th of May, from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. for 2 hours, it'll be a comment. It's an EPA sponsored and run event, and we've done this about the fourth one we've done over the last probably 3 months. So it's great information being shared out. Great place to ask questions. A lot of the faith-based groups will be on this. A lot of the non-government organizations that are very much concerned about what's happening in the island of St. Croix. Environmental will be on there asking some very good questions. But we always have had good dialogue and discussion. And it's really nice to see EPA involved with this, as well as the government of the Virgin Islands and part of this local emergency planning committee. Good representation as a team approach to this, and we communicate very well amongst each other. Like I mentioned, we're meeting each week right now with including Port Hamilton, Ocean Point, again, multiple of other agencies. But that's the best way to get involved with that, to see that for tomorrow night.
Great. And just in review for our audience, you gave the phone number for the EPA hotline, which is 866-462-4789. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Again, English, Spanish, or Haitian Creole. Yeah.
So if you experience any foul odor in the air or any possible effects from the refinery, we encourage our audience to please call the EPA hotline at 866-462-4789. Also to look at the Facebook page of VITEMA to get information on the video town hall, which will be taking place tomorrow evening, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yes. And today in this show, we talked a lot about the cleanup of the refinery, the de-inventorying of certain substances, 3 substances in particular. But next time we have you on the show, we'd like to talk about future plans for the refinery, the plans to restart it and to restart it safely, and what VITEMA is doing to protect, or going to do to protect, the environment in the future along with the EPA. But Director Jaschen, we are just about out of time. Again, thank you for joining us. As always, you brought us some very important information. We remind our audience to always be aware of the tsunami alerts and move to higher ground when you hear one. Don't hesitate, stay safe, and let the EPA know if you experience any of the negative effects of the refinery. So, Director Jaschen.
Thank you so much, Troy. If I can I put one more plug in for our
Yes.
seniors?
Yes.
We have a senior registry that basically Department of Human Services manages and maintains. We have about 800 individuals signed up, but we always want to get more individuals signed up. So if you're over age 60, if you live alone and you have a disability, please contact the Department of Human Services at the following phone numbers: on St. Thomas at Newt Hansen, 340-774-0930, extension 4018. On St. John and Cruz Bay, 340-776-6334. And on St. Croix, it's the Richmond Senior Center, 340-772-7148. You can find forms at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, VI elections. And this is a chance for you to really sync up with the Department of Human Services for information sharing about anything hurricane related, or information that Commissioner Kazi Gomez wants to send out to you, as well as for you to give feedback to us on how you're doing. So appreciate it.
Thank you. We're out of time. We wish you a pleasant day. We look forward to having you in a future show.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you.